Hello and welcome to another episode of the FemiNinja Project. And as always, I have a wonderful guest with me today, but this one is really super special, and we are going to learn an awful lot about health, wellness, and longevity from an expert. His name is Michael Dorfman. He is a health and nutrition life coach, investigative author, and longevity advocate whose mission is to help people discover how food, mindset, and daily habits can radically transform health at any age, including the fifth stage of life, which is 80 to 100 plus. At the tender age of 84, Michael isn't just talking about vibrant aging, he's living it. He is the author of the book titled The Thriving Vegan, The Longevity Wellness Revolution, and Information Warfare, The Battle for Truth and Freedom, which is based on his 3-year long in-depth research and investigations that expose how information manipulation on several of today's existential issues have dramatically changed our lives since the pandemic began in 2020. Michael, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Cheryl. Great to be here. Look, I was really looking forward to this one.
Oh, me too. Just reading your bio. And of course, as I just want the listeners to know, this is a very abbreviated bio. You have been doing so much studying and research since, what has it been, 20 years of research? Or am I just making that
No,
up?
more or less, it started because my first book came out in 2019, but I
Hmm.
started doing research pretty much most of my life, actually.
Hmm. So, have you always been interested in longevity and health and nutrition and wellness, or did this just crop up?
Well, I my first big change on nutrition was in 1976 when I became a vegetarian.
Hmm.
But interestingly enough, it wasn't mostly because of, or mainly because of health interests, but it was because I became interested in religion and philosophy, Oriental religion and philosophy. And on that side of the world, there were a lot of people who were vegetarians. So I said, well, why not? Let's do it. So my wife also, we became vegetarians on the same day.
Hmm.
So, and that lasted several decades actually that we gave up meat of any kind, but we continued eating cheese and eggs. So
Mm-hmm.
that was the way it was, and I was feeling fine. I was before when I had we were eating more, meat, regular the standard American diet, more or less. I was heavier, but I started losing weight. When I took on the vegetarian diet, and I was feeling well, except every year I was getting sick. Not terribly sick,
Hmm.
but I'm talking about flu-like symptoms, whether it was chest colds and fever and headache and sore throats. But this was happening like every year, and I couldn't understand why. And each time it would last like two weeks. But
Wow.
I accepted it. And then my brother, who was had been plant based for 10 years at that time, we're talking about 1976.
Wow.
He told me, or he recommended
Mhm.
changing to a plant-based diet or vegan diet, as which is
Mhm.
the most common term. But would have to give up cheese and pizza and everything that has to do with that. And I didn't want to do it. I said, no, I'm too attached to it or too
Mhm.
addicted to it. So I kept on doing the diet, getting sick every year. And then eventually recommended the book, The China Study by Dr. T. Colin Campbell.
Yeah.
And I read it, and it changed my whole perspective on what health was all about. And this was 17 years ago
Wow.
that I became plant based. I don't, even though my first book was The Thriving Vegan,
Hmm.
I don't use that term very often because vegan is has a much bigger meaning to it.
Hmm.
And some people are vegans because of protection of animals or the planet. but my focus is mainly on health. So that's because you can actually be eating a vegan diet and not eating very healthy. You can eat,
That's
French
true.
fries, all kinds of, cakes and donuts and drinking Coca-Cola and all that stuff.
Twinkies,
Yeah,
Fritos, you name it. I mean, there's no limit to our access to
yeah.
junk food.
And a lot of people do that. So for
Hmm.
me, it's like, no, whole food plant-based, whole food plant. I use it more now, plant-powered,
Hmm. Oh, I
because
love that.
yeah, because things have changed for me. I've seen diet in a different way
Hmm.
now. We can get into that. But anyway, 17 years ago, I became plant-based. And what happened at that time, it was 2 years already. I was plant-based. And a friend of my wife and mine, Beatrice, she was also living in Mexico.
Hmm.
She had a heart attack and they rushed her to the hospital. She had a quadruple bypass heart surgery. It
Ooh.
was very intense. She even had a heart attack on the operating table.
Oh.
But it was a successful surgery, and
Hmm.
what they do is they replace the aorta with
Hmm.
a vein from the leg, and they
Hmm.
sent her home. And she was doing okay. A year later, she starts having pain in her arm, which is a sign of possible
Hmm.
cardiovascular problems. And they called her back to the hospital and they found out it was clogged again. And what they wanted to do was to put a stent in to open it up. But the problem was the stent wouldn't fit because the vein that had replaced the original artery was too narrow. And they told her that there wasn't much they could do. They sent her home and they told her not to do too many exercises, exert herself, climb stairs,
Oh.
etc. What they didn't tell her, though, and they told my wife and they told her son, both were there during the at that time at the hospital, was that she had about 6 months to live,
Oh.
and she wasn't told that, and she came home, and I at that time I was already 2 years following plant-based
Hmm.
diet, and I was reading books on how doctors and healthcare professionals were having success reversing heart problems, cardiovascular disease with plant-based foods. And one is
Hmm.
specifically it was Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, who wrote the book Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease, which was actually at the top of the book. It says the book that changed Bill Clinton's life was Bill Clinton was getting stents put in, and he decided that he didn't want to do that anymore. And
Hmm.
supposedly he read this book and others as well, and he became a vegan. I don't
Hmm.
know if he's still a vegan at this point. He's
Hmm.
still around though,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
and so I gave her the book because it was like it impacted me a lot. This book, I gave her the book, and I told her she still didn't know whether she had 6 months to live.
Oh
That
my
she was
God.
told that, and that was a good thing actually. It
Yes,
turned out.
very much so.
So it ended up that she read the book. She decided to make the change. She read the book,
Hmm.
and instead of living 6 months, she lived almost 10 years.
My
So
goodness.
for me, that was wow. That had such an impact because I was reading about these things, but I
Hmm.
didn't, all of a sudden I was able to help a friend of mine.
Hmm.
And this changed so much. I started questioning everything, all the information about, my big question was if this is true and there are so many, studies and so much research on this changing, turning cardiovascular disease around. How come it's not even part of the protocols that doctors offer patients? I mean, even if you do go through a surgery, why shouldn't you be told about this? Well, you don't want to have it happen again, like happened with Beatrice, because the same problem, the blockage, was because she didn't change her diet.
Right.
So this is what happened. So this was a big question, and I, research. You start opening up the Pandora's box about,
Right.
doctors. They just don't get training in nutrition and lifestyle, and
Hmm.
they're just, so many of them push the pill as
Hmm.
the first choice, and And so that was it. And then I started doing more research that, it wasn't just heart disease. There
Right.
are other chronic diseases that were being helped, either slowed down, helped, or even
Hmm.
reversed with change nutrition and plant-based nutrition and lifestyle changes. So this got me going, and that's what I. So anyway, the whole idea of longevity, which was the original question,
Hmm.
uh, it just came up in the last few years because, hey, I'm doing great. I'm in my 60s. I'm doing great. I'm in my 70s. I'm doing great in my late 70s. And
Hmm.
here it is, what is it? The lifestyle expectancy is in the mid or upper 70s. Hey, I passed that. I'm doing
That's
great.
right.
And all of a sudden, and then I see, hey, there's a lot of research now on longevity. Doctors and yeah, it's like becoming a popular theme on longevity. And I'm reading this information and I'm starting, hey, I'm picking up on this. So, most of the doctors or the authors of the books on longevity are actually in their 50s and 60s. And here I am, I'm in 80 already. Hey, that's great. I could live it. What they're talking about, I could live it. So that's what happened. And so longevity became very important to me. And that's what I decided to do. I want to guide people through the 80s and to the 90s and wherever it takes you through what I'm experiencing. And I'm learning too. I haven't stopped learning, which is very
Right.
important as you
Hmm.
get older, never stop learning. So I'm just trying to be an example,
Well,
practice what I preach.
you're
And
doing a
that's where it
fine job of
happened.
it.
Well, thank you.
So tell us again what the name of that one book was, that
The
reversing the
longevity,
heart. No, the one on
the
reversing heart.
thriving vegan.
Well, we got that one, but the one
Yeah.
that that physician wrote to reverse
Oh,
cardiovascular disease.
how to prevent and reverse heart disease by Dr. T. Caldwell Esselstyn. No, T.
Okay.
Caldwell. What am I? Caldwell Esselstyn. Colin Campbell or somebody else. Caldwell Esselstyn, and he happened to be the chief of staff at the Cleveland Clinic. He was one of their
Okay.
top surgeons. So that's one of the, maybe the prime heart clinic in the United States, even
Right.
considered maybe worldwide. So he's still around. He's still authoring. He's in his 90s already. Him and T. Colin Campbell, they're
Hmm.
like very close friends. So they're still going, giving courses, giving. It's amazing,
Why
and
not?
they're
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's it.
I just have one thing I have to say, when you're talking about how, the physicians really aren't trained in, or at least they weren't back then, lifestyle and, this type of thing and everything, and diet and nutrition. And I'm a former respiratory therapist. So I worked in hospitals for like 20 years. And I worked with a lot of the cardiologists, of course, and pulmonologists. And I got to tell you, probably a lot of them did not have the best habits. Let's just put it to you that way when it came to diet and lifestyle choices and everything. So it's like, you know, if they were not following that type of trajectory, why would they encourage their patients to?
Yeah, and I just remember I had seen this was about I don't know about 30 years when I went to see a heart specialist, and
Hmm.
he was so overweight. You know, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I dated a guy actually whose father was an OBGYN. And he would always laugh and he would say, every time I go and I look at all the cardiologists and I see their gut hanging out and everything, he says, I just don't get it. But,
yeah,
life choices, right?
that's it.
So did Bernice, was that her name?
Beatrice,
Beatrice,
Beatrice.
did she ever find find out that she had been given such a short?
Yeah, it's interesting because at the very end, she actually, when she passed away a few years ago, it wasn't from heart. It was she had problems with breathing,
Mm.
so she had lung problems. But we told her, and she laughed, and at that point I knew, boy, it was so good that we didn't tell them because doctors tell patients a lot of the
Right.
times they even tell them you have about this, and they die within that time because
Right.
this is powerful right up here,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and yeah, it's amazing. So yeah, so she found out at the end,
And she
Uh,
laughed. That is
and
hilarious.
she laughed.
Yeah. Both of my parents passed away from leukemia, and it was a strange, I'm sure it was environmental. I grew up in a small steel town in Pittsburgh or outside of Pittsburgh. So I think that had a lot to do with it. But it was really funny because the last year of their lives, they were both playing this weird game of like end stage leukemia poker, is what I was calling it. And it's like, I'll see you in infection and I'll raise you an admission. Well, I'll see you that admission and I'll raise you an ER visit. I mean, okay, I'll take that on, and now I'll have a hospitalization. But it was really, I mean, it was sad, but we're come from a tribe that likes to laugh a lot and poke fun of things. But when they told my mother, that okay, this is it. There's no other treatment left. And she says, well, how much time do I have? And they told her, and it was, I don't know, less than a month. She died exactly to the day that they said was her end stage, was game ending. And she was like, okay, this is it. I'll die on that day. And she did.
And you know what? I'm just thinking now is that I think what happens when you're told that something like that, uh, you get stressed out. It begins a whole new
Oh,
life of
yeah.
stress.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what has a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
Because yeah, that's the way I feel about it. Because you know when you're going about when you're going to die, and you believe it. It's just the stress hormone, the cortisol is just causing panic throughout the body and every day. Because how could
Hmm.
you avoid not thinking about that,
Right.
especially if you have no other alternative?
Right. It's about two episodes, one or two episodes before yours. I interviewed a woman who actually had like a trifecta of cancers. And she was fairly young at the time. She was in her 50s when it first started. And she had a stage 4 triple positive breast cancer. And then she ended up with a basal cell carcinoma, which, that's fairly easily treatable, and then thyroid cancer. So she had this whole, trifecta over a course of maybe 10 or 12 years. And it was amazing the way she handled it. And, she would like tell the doctors, well, that's what you say, or that's what you think.
Uh-huh.
But, and she really stood up for herself, and she was a very strong advocate for herself. And even, she says, to the point of where, they would take notes, or she would take notes in all her appointments and everything. And they were okay with that. And she said, you could even record your doctor's visits. And the first time she tried that, the doctor was like, "You can't do that because that's against that's a HIPAA violation." And she goes, "Oh no, you
Really?
can't record my, but I can record you." And that's what she did. She would record everything. So then she always had it. And it wasn't to say, they're doing something wrong, but you forget things when you're under that much stress. And this did. It helped relieve her stress. It gave her some empowerment and put her in control. And there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's what happens with the
Yeah.
doctors is, I just came before I came on, actually, I thought of this quote. I came up with this. I said, from 80 to 100, from 80 and on, medicine can help you survive. Lifestyle will help you thrive.
Oh, I like that.
So I really like that. And that's what it's all about. That's why I became so interested in what's out there
Mm-hmm.
and what my son Adam, he's uh, uh, he's a health well he's a coach
Mm-hmm.
on somatic healing,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
and also he's into this whole new wave, and it's a whole new wave, I think, of holistic wellness that's happening,
Mm-hmm.
where all of a sudden they're going back to even ancient times, the importance of breath, how breath was so important thousands of years ago in many ancient cultures in healing. And
Mm-hmm.
this is like a new wave that's coming, and I feel very privileged in being able to tap into what's
Mm-hmm.
what's happening. And I'm listening to a lot of different, and I sort of listen to, people, and well, I'll listen to somebody else, and all of a sudden there's a lot of similarities between what's being, studied now, the research that's going on. And one of the things I want to mention also is that I got turned on to the whole blue zone, the blue zone populations.
Yep.
I don't know if all your listeners know what the blue zones are and what
Go
it's.
ahead and just tell us a
Yeah,
little bit more about it.
yeah.
Just
Well,
in case.
Dan Buettner worked at. He was at the. Where did he work again? At the. Well, it'll come up to me again. But anyway, he was sent out by his the group that was getting together enough people to go, enough teams to go to find out where the longest and healthiest living people on the planet live. So National Geographic, important. That's where he worked for National Geographic, and he was sent there. And it was a 2-year study, and he traveled around and he found 5 blue zone areas, which I'll just mention what they are: Okinawa in Japan, Sardinia in Italy, Icaria in Greece, Loma Linda in California, and also Nicoya in Costa Rica. So it wasn't just to find out where these people live, but it was to also find out what similarities they have. Because if there were similarities, since these populations were separated by oceans and land masses, that's something important. So he did find certain similarities, and I read the book and I got into this, and I started applying this in my life. Because if these people live 10, 15 years longer than people in the West live, they're living, into their 90s. They have, more centenarians than any other populations on the planet, so they must be doing something right. And one of it was the plant-based nutrition. Not maybe 100% in all these areas. Some places they ate meat and they ate fish. So that started when I started reading about that part of it, the whole nutrition part of it. It was, so, okay, you don't have to be 100% plant powered. I am, because that's my decision. If you're not, if you're not 100%, just like in the blue zones, maybe you could be 80%, 90%. That's what Beatrice did. Actually, I just want to mention it. She never was 100% plant-based. She was always around 80, 85%. So, and she lived, instead of 6 months, she lived those almost 10 years. So the important thing is let's focus on what's important in plants, and the most important thing in plants is the fiber. Fiber only comes from plants, and fiber happens to be the favorite food of our gut microbiome. And that the gut, I mean, these are the studies, what the studies are showing now. The gut is like the source of, maybe not all, but so many of our chronic diseases, chronic inflammation, our immune system that doesn't work that well. So this is why it's very important to get enough fiber so that the bacteria in our gut will be very happy, and they will respond by giving us what we need to be healthy. And it's called short chain fatty acids, which are produced by the gut bacteria, the good gut bacteria. And that's what we want to do. We want to have a larger amount of good gut bacteria than the gut bacteria that's not that good. That will lead to pathogens. So this is what we want to do. That's why we need an abundance of fiber, and we are not even getting close to that. If you're on the standard American diet, you're not even getting close to that. I think women are supposed to get a minimum of 25 grams, men 38 grams of fiber daily, and they both get around 15 grams. Jeez. And you're supposed to, but really to be healthy, you need more than that. Yeah. So that's why it's very important to get the fiber. So okay, you're not eating, you're eating meat, you're eating fish, whatever you're eating, get the fiber, increase the amount of fiber. And fiber is found through in fruits and vegetables, in grains and seeds and nuts, and that's where it is. So increase your intake of plant-based foods. And
Okay, I
also
just want to
the
make I just
yeah,
want to
go
make
ahead.
one point. I apologize for interrupting, but
Yeah.
of course, you're talking about fiber and how good it is for us, and the plant-based and all that stuff. So I just want to highlight that for the listeners that okay, the fiber comes from the plant, not from this little jar that you buy in the health food department. Health food, yeah, health food. I'm using air quotes here,
Well,
but
that
so
gets us in. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
it's so easy to get sucked into that. But again, I think where you're going is how we're being fed, no pun intended, a lot of misinformation and have been for years about what is good for us.
Yeah, well, that's where we get back to the importance of eating whole foods,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of people take supplements. A lot of I took this. This was about 12 years ago. I was taking 13 supplements a day. I was vegan. I was plant based, but I was sold on this.
Ah,
I was taking 13 supplements a day, and I used to go every year because my parents were living in Florida,
mm-hmm.
and I used to go. We could visit them, and every time I visited them, I went to this big store. I'm not going to mention any names. They also publish an important magazine which I used to read, get freely every month. So I was buying all of these supplements, and it was costing me a fortune.
Right.
So I would get the magazine, and the magazine had great articles, but I noticed one thing that was happening, and that was the magazine talked about great articles on how to cure disease with this vitamin and that mineral, etc. So I was, okay, so I'm going to buy all that stuff. And the article was great. And then I started wondering, how come they don't talk about food? Well, if you can get vitamins, I remember you can get vitamins from food. I mean, it's been that way for millions of years. Going back,
Mm-hmm.
you can get the vitamins from foods. You can get the minerals. You can get the protein from foods. So, but and I realized, and then I would read the article in the magazine, and like 3 pages later, I would go and say, "Oh, there's the vitamin that they're talking about for that disease that they wrote the article." And I realized it's a business.
Mm-hmm.
Vitamin supplements is just like, yeah,
Oh, it's huge. It is
it's
huge.
huge.
It's the same with pharmaceuticals. The pharmaceutical
Exactly. It's the
don't
same
get me
thing.
started on that. And the food industry, it's like here, have all of this wonderful stuff. It's so good for you. The food pyramid that when they redid it several years ago, and Fruit Loops was like the base of it, is like, wait a minute, there's something very wrong here. And I remember when the 2020 first hit, and it was like, oh, you're going to shelter in place, do this, do that. And at first I thought it was a joke. I mean, I was kind of laughing about it, and watching everybody panic, and the news was just, it was ridiculous. And both my husband and I were respiratory therapists, so we knew a lot about viral diseases and all that stuff. And we were actually RTs before they even had the ventilator circuits closed. So we were working in intensive care units where we would inhale everything that the patient exhaled, because it wasn't a closed circuit. And I looked at my husband and I said, this almost sounds like a social experimentation. I said, something sounds really wrong here. And then, of course, they're saying, get to the, grocery store, and, there's no toilet paper and blah, blah, blah. So we waited a few days, and then we did go to the grocery store, and I was horrified that we couldn't even get in because there were so many people coming out, and their carts were jam packed full of things like cartons of Coke and, different kind of sodas, ice cream. Fritos were a big one, Cheetos, and all this stuff. And I'm like, where's the beef? Where's what are you eating? And it was just so, what do they call that? The dissonance, the psychological dissonance or whatever, was just crazy.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioning that, because what happened with me, I was when they did everybody went into lockdown. I was to me it was like, wow, what a great opportunity with the pandemic. Now everybody's in lockdown. Now they can take the time in their homes to become healthy. They can start eating healthy. And I'm sure that the medical profession is going to tell people how to be healthy, do
Oh, yeah.
exercise in the house. Not a word. And it's like exactly what you say. There was nothing there.
Well, the
It's
only
just
thing they
like,
told us to do was wear a mask,
yeah,
stand 6 feet apart, get this injection.
right.
And, like I said, I just, and the world went nuts. I mean, and again, that skill that we inherently are born with and can actually fine tune the critical thinking skills went right out the window.
Yeah.
And I think it's
Yeah.
coming back, though. People are taking now a renewed interest in, what really is in our pharmaceuticals and in our food and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and it's the pharmaceutical industry, just like the supplement industry. They're probably maybe they're $1 trillion industries by now. They're just so
Jeez.
powerful. So that's why it's so important. We have to take the responsibility on ourselves. Each
Mm-hmm.
person, I mean, each one of
Mm-hmm.
your listeners has to realize is that we have, if we really want to thrive and enjoy our lives until later, later years, we have to start reading. We have to start
Mm-hmm.
taking responsibility for our own health
Mm-hmm.
because it's very limited out there because we're not getting it from our
Mm-hmm.
doctors. We're not getting it from the mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm trying to share,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. But once you do that, once you start seeing that you have so much power if you
Yeah.
really accept it and the ninja powers. Maybe that's what it's all about,
Yes, it is.
So, yeah, and you have so much power, and you just know you start learning things. It's like, wow, there is so much out there to learn, and that's part of becoming, remaining, and
Mm-hmm.
healthy and thriving is never stop learning.
Mm-hmm.
It is great. I mean, there's so many things you can learn about, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and I learn about health, and that's what I want to share with people. But there's so many other things, to really challenge. And that's another
Mm-hmm.
thing that's very important: challenging our bodies, challenging.
Mm-hmm.
I give an example of when you go to a gym. Anybody goes to a gym and they're doing, exercise with the biceps,
Mm-hmm.
and it takes a while. What happens is that when you're doing these exercises, you're destroying tissues in your biceps. That's what it
Mm-hmm.
does. So
Mm-hmm.
in order to get it rebuilt and it comes back stronger. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why it's important to challenge your body, challenge your mind,
Mm-hmm.
because even though it may be painful at a time, the beginning, it's hard to do. It's like you're going to be rewarded because it's going to make
Mm-hmm.
you stronger and it's going to make you
Mm-hmm.
more resilient. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there's a whole thing going even back to the hunter gatherers where they needed so much resilience at that
Mm-hmm.
time because there was so many difficulties, whether it's the food or the climate. They didn't have their homes where it was air
Mm-hmm.
conditioning and heated. They just were living in this cave and they had to move. Oh, it's getting cold again. The snow's coming. We got to go to another. I mean, this is where their lives were, and the
Oh.
ones who survived were the ones that we inherited their, DNA, their strengths
Mm-hmm.
from. And part of that was their, a lot of people don't know about people, the most popular diet today is the keto diet.
Mm.
And people believe, well, this is okay, I'll do that. But there's no long-term studies from the keto diet.
Right.
And you may feel great now in your 40s, 50s, even
Right.
60s, but let's see how it works out long term because you're not getting your fiber. They're saying don't, no fruits, no, so
I just don't
that's,
understand that.
yeah. So, it's really, yeah, I mean, that's why we need to really
Mm-hmm.
study and find out what's
Mm-hmm.
going on and then put it into practice.
Mm-hmm. I want to circle back now to
Yeah.
the blue zone because I found that fascinating when I first heard about it, and then I learned a little bit more, and I actually bought a cookbook that is the Blue Zone cookbook, where these same researchers, I think, took every single one of those areas that you listed, and went through like what their diet was, and you even have recipes in this book, and it was I mean, it was really fascinating. But the other thing that I thought was really impressive and so powerful was another thing that was part of the longevity component was the community, and how the elders lived with the next generation. I mean, they all worked together, they all cooked together. They would go outside and go for walks together. They had one guy was, I think he was 120, and they showed him a picture of him, and he was on an exercise bike. And so there he was, pedaling on the bike, and the kids were around and everybody's around. So it was the mindset and the community and having a feeling of belonging that really
Yeah,
made a big difference too.
yeah, totally. And this is like a whole other, subject, which I love.
Mhm.
It goes back to the hunter-gatherers, our ancestors. They lived in tribes.
Yeah.
They depended totally on each other because
Mhm.
of, the animals that can attack them. They couldn't fight a saber-toothed tiger alone, or a mammoth, or whatever is there. But they were so dependent on each other. They depended totally on each other. It
Yeah.
was the family.
Mhm.
So this is the way it is. This is the way it was. And this is the way human beings are, because we're social creatures.
We are.
And then we are. And so that's what happened when you were mentioning about the blue zones. Yes, they all had this community where, whether it was based on, maybe religion or beliefs
Mhm.
or things they had in common, but it was a caring community that you could depend on. It wasn't
Mhm.
just the hanging out with somebody in a bar or whatever it is. But
Mhm.
it was people that really cared for each other.
Mhm.
And that's what you start sharing, that feeling. And that's so important. So that's the community. And that's one of the secrets of the blue zones. There's on Netflix is the Blue Zone, Live to 100 Secrets of the Blue Zones documentary. I don't know
Mhm.
if you're aware of it. Or
I had no, but I
It's
will
on
look that up.
Netflix. Yeah.
Oh, it is.
It's a
Okay.
four part series.
Mhm.
And Dan Buettner revisited, this was 2 years ago, the Blue Zones. And he interviews people, and you see uh, this guy over, he's like 110. He's riding on his horse with his, putting the sheep together. What is that? I mean, and then they go to Loma Linda, and I'm so happy because I'm looking at Loma Linda and what they do. They have their community, and then they go and they're playing pickleball. Pickleball was part of their community, and I play a lot of pickleball, and it's like, yes, it's part of it. I'm so happy to see that. So this was very important, but what's happening today is exactly the opposite. People
Right.
are
I know.
alone. People
Right.
are on their cell phones.
Yeah.
People are not speaking to people in person. They're not, it's like they've changed, speaking to people in groups in
Right.
persons. Now you can just go, and it's not the same thing, because you're not
No.
in person. Is a whole different vibe. It's a whole different experience, because you're sharing this. There's so much, it's
Yeah.
an energy field. But that's what
Mhm.
we're getting used to more and more, especially now people are home. They're not even going to work with other people. It's like, and that's why one of the big problems of today is loneliness. People
Mhm.
are depressed because they're lonely,
Well, I mean,
and
if you only have that little thing to look at, the screen, and talk to and
yeah.
whatever, and that's, don't tell anybody. This is a little secret. This is just between the two of us, okay? But one of the reasons, another one of the many reasons why my husband and I left Denver and moved out here was because he was becoming isolated. Once he retired, he didn't have the kind of male camaraderie that he did before when he was still working. And it kept, like, okay, now another friend moved, way up out of state, and then another friend moved. And it was like, you need some male companionship. I mean, I know I'm pretty entertaining, but I can't be everything. You need to hang out with some guys. And he had some really good friends who lived out here in this little town. And I thought, that's a perfect fit because you already have companionship. And
Mm-hmm.
he plays pickleball, 5 days a week at least, and hangs out with his buddies, and they'll go out maybe for a beer or whatever, and it's like, go, just go.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's same thing I found with the pickleball, because there's so many, we have in the pickleball community is like over 200 people participating.
Hmm.
And I would say 80% are from the US. So we
Wow.
having people come down here, and now it's so it's ridiculously crowded because they're coming here for the cold, and I
Yep.
like can't wait till they leave so we can because now you have to wait like 20 minutes to play a game or whatever it is. But yeah, and it's really interesting because I'm playing this game, I'm 84, and I'm playing against the 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, and I'm doing well. I'm doing well. And I don't even see them as here I am, I'm an old guy playing
Uh-huh.
against these young, people. And I'm just going to beat them.
Right.
It's like I don't even think of age. I don't think of age anymore
That's
because
so
I've just
funny.
identified. It's like I've taken on this new identity, and that's what I call the fifth stage of
Uh-huh.
life, from 80 to 100. That when you're in your 20s or 30s, or you don't think of it. You're in a stage or anything. You're
Yeah.
living the time, whatever it is. You don't think about I'm getting old or something. You just, and that's where I feel now. So this identity is not one of like I'm getting old. The
Right.
identity is just thriving, enjoying my life, and
Yeah.
being as healthy as I can because you really want to avoid getting a chronic disease
Oh yeah.
because then that starts the stress and you start worrying, well, how long. So the whole thing is not waiting till the last minute because people think that you start getting cancer when you're
Hmm.
60s or
Right.
70.
Yeah.
It starts way before. Same thing with heart disease.
Yeah.
So my father, when I was born in 1942, and my father didn't go to the army because he had two children, and he ended up at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. He was painting
Hmm.
ships, the
Hmm.
hulls of ships. So I didn't know until later, which was when he passed away, that there was asbestos in the
Oh,
holds of the ship. They didn't know about the asbestos and cancer at that time. This was in 1942 till the end of the war, and
wow.
he died. It said 40 years later from a mesothelioma, which is what you get from
Right.
asbestos. 40 years to develop. So that's what I'm trying
Jeez.
to tell, and especially women that, a mammogram detects early detect. It's not early detection. It just got to the point where the machine could pick it up. It could have
Yeah.
been developing for 10, 20 years.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, so don't think that that's what happens. It's never too early to start,
Hmm.
and it's never too late to start either.
Hmm.
But if the goal is you don't want to have a chronic disease when you're in your 70s, because 70% of the population in the US at least has at least one chronic disease, whether it's heart disease, cancer, type 2 diabetes,
Hmm.
obesity, high blood pressure, osteoporosis. We need to avoid, and you can by really,
Hmm.
you really, really can. And
So let
I
me
had,
ask.
yeah, go ahead.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm just dying to ask you this question about your knees. How do your knees feel? Because you're playing pickleball. I mean, that's a lot of
Oh,
lateral movement and
well, that's a problem.
okay.
You know, 'cause- I forgot to say that. So you got to be careful when you play pickleball also.
Yeah.
We have a
Yeah.
doctor here, Dr. Gill. He's
Uh-huh.
from Colombia. So he's a naturopath. He's an MD,
Oh,
but he
nice.
has, yeah, he does ozone therapy, PRP. He
Oh,
does
nice.
all kind. He's really great and very inexpensive. But he says his ever since pickleball came to San Miguel, his business is really thriving.
I'll bet.
And I go up there and I went, yeah, because I have a problem with my shoulder. It's not just the knees.
Hmm.
So yeah, so you got to be careful because you can do crazy things. You think I'm still 84, but you start
Yeah.
moving around and you're leaping for balls. It's like I say, hey, I shouldn't do that. My wife is always worrying about me. She reminds me every time I go, don't do something crazy.
Oh, well, I worry a lot too when Mike walks out the door. It's like,
Yeah,
okay,
because
just
when
be
you're on
careful
the
out there.
court there, you don't think about anything. You're
Well,
just
yeah,
in the
because you're in the
game.
moment.
Yeah, exactly. Totally.
That's pretty
So
funny.
yes, yeah, I had problems with my knee. So I wear knee braces
Hmm.
as a protective thing all the time when I go to play pickleball.
Well, I got to tell you, there is this fabulous magnesium cream or magnesium balm that I use because I still take ballet at least 2 times a week, sometimes more. I pole dance, but again, that's our little secret. Don't tell anybody. But boy, that's that, talk about strength building. And sometimes I get really sore. I put that magnesium cream either on my joints or the sore muscles, and the next morning, oh, I feel great. So ask your naturopath if
Magnesium cream. He
it's a
probably has
magnesium cream.
he has in a
Yeah,
homeopathic
I
pharmacy, so
figured.
maybe the
Yeah,
magnesium cream for
yeah.
any kind of pain or
Well, just for they really they recommend it even like for foot pain, for plantar fasciitis, for any kind of muscle pain.
joint
Um,
pain.
yeah, joint pain. I use it
Joint
on my
pain.
knees a lot.
Well, yeah,
You do
magnesium
enough
cream.
grand plies, your knees start to ache a little bit.
Hmm.
Yeah, but yeah, ask him about that. The kind
Yeah, I will.
I
I
order
will.
it from a company in where are they? They're in Northern California, and they make goat milk products like goat milk
Okay.
soaps and lotions, and they have a goat milk magnesium balm. And yeah, it's wonders,
Excellent. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I'll do that.
I mean, there's always something you can do.
Yeah, I'm open.
So you keep doing what you love. Oh,
Exactly.
and there's one other question I really wanted to ask you because as I was going through your bio and looking up your books and all of that information, is that you on the cover of your first book with all of those nice fresh tomatoes?
No, it's a woman.
Is it?
Yeah. No, but I never even knew that woman because when I had the book, they came up with it.
Oh, they
The
did.
vo-
Okay.
yeah,
Maybe
the one who was yeah, I never met her, but yeah, it's a woman.
yeah. I'll
I
have to
think
look again
I
with
think
my
it's a
new
woman. I
glasses because
gotta
I
look
just
at it.
got new glasses and maybe I saw all this curly dark hair and these great big beautiful
Yeah, look at
tomatoes.
this hair. That's not curly dark hair. I wish it was, but it's like, but I still have hair.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
Oh, oh, that's so funny. Okay, so Michael, where can the listeners find you? How can they connect with you? Get some of this great information, get your books, anything that you want to share with the listeners right now, please do. Anything you
Okay.
want to promote?
Well, my website, longevitywellnessrevolution.com. But I'm offering now a free guidebook, which I came out with like it was about 3 weeks ago. Longevity Wellness Revolution / guidebook, and that's free. So people can get that. And it's sort of like as an entry to my book, which is the
Mm-hmm.
Longevity Wellness Revolution, which is coming out at the end of the month. I'm pretty sure because it's almost ready to be uploaded to
Okay.
Amazon. So that's the Longevity Wellness Revolution. And I also have a Substack, which
Mm-hmm.
I'll put up. I'll give you the information on that. I come out with articles every week,
Mm-hmm.
either a week or every 10 days on the latest thing I've discovered when I'm putting into practice or getting deeper into. I've come up with this new thing, which is the 7 pillars of fifth stage longevity wellness, which
Wow.
is yeah. So I'm going to come out with that too. So I'm evolving as I
Mm-hmm.
grow older. I have no idea how long I'm going to live, and I don't, whatever it is, because there's things you don't control sometimes. So, but I'm just expanding and learning and applying new lifestyle practices to my life.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's um, you know uh, breath work
Mm-hmm.
or intermittent fasting or hot and cold showers or just yeah. And just with my brain playing Scrabble or chess with my wife and
Ooh,
just
that's a good point. That yeah, keeping
yeah,
that
really
brain
important.
stimulation.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
learning things, and that's what's also important because this is from the blue zones, the purpose, having purpose. What do you like to do? Maybe
Yeah.
there's something from you when you were, younger that, maybe I rediscovered writing because I used to, when I was in my 20s, I used to write. I used to write poetry and then I couldn't write the rest of my life. And I said, why can't I write? And then I found out the reason because I had nothing I wanted to write about that I was passionate about until this came.
Uh-huh.
So maybe you like to sing, or maybe you like to learn an instrument, or take
Mhm.
care of people, make people laugh. Is it's the fifth stage. It's a time to thrive, not just
Mhm.
because people they think you're in the I'll survive, and that's what doctors make you believe. oh, with their medicine or whatever, oh, we'll help you survive as long as you can manage your illness, as
No.
long as you can. No, we don't want that.
Yeah.
What we want is to really enjoy the fifth stage over 80 as well, much as we enjoyed 30s, 40s, 50s. And that's what I think it's all about.
Mm. Excellent. Well, Michael, thank you so much for being here. This has been a great conversation, and I have just loved talking to you. I
It
love
was,
your
I loved it.
energy. I love your mindset. I love, your philosophy. It's just awesome.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Cheryl. It was a pleasure being here.
Everybody, thank you so much for listening. And please do share this episode with everyone you know. Such fantastic information and something so positive and uplifting that we need to hear. It's like you don't go to the pills, and just get your fiber and make sure it comes from a plant, not from a jar. And just remember, there's a whole lot of life in each and every one of us. And if somebody's telling you something that isn't quite right, do question it and work on your critical thinking skills because that's very important. And that is the way of the FemiNinja.